If confirmed, obviously, that means that the Ivanishvili's regime was using chemical weapons against its own people.
Sometimes calling things by its name, identifying the right diagnosis, may be a better start
For treatment. So Ukraine, whether you want it or not, is becoming an essential part of European security, particularly when you want to resist Russia's invasion.
And in 2008, when we were warning our European partners that Russia might launch a war against Georgia, they were saying, just make sure you don't get provoked.
I went to Soviet school and I remember
too.
that Lenin picture in the class.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I missed that.
Hello and welcome to Talk Georgia, which is my English language podcast covering Georgian and regional politics. Talk Georgia is brought to you by Droeba Media Group, a trusted source of high-quality news and analysis, and GSAC, a think tank providing comprehensive political analysis of Georgia and wider Black Sea region, also academic and practical training for postgraduate students and mid-career professionals. To dive into the key developments of the Georgia's politics and also international politics, today we're joined by Nino Kalandadze, a lawyer, politician, diplomat, founder and executive director of Chavchavadze Center for European Studies. Nino was Deputy Foreign Minister of Georgia, was a Member of Parliament, advisor to the Georgian President, a member of High Council of Justice, to name a few his positions. She also worked in academia, was assistant professor at the Caucasus University and also dean at the Caucasus University. She's Georgian, German, and US educated. She read law all the way from Tbilisi State University to Mannheim University, and finally at the famous Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University. Nino, welcome to the show. Please feel free to add anything to my limited introduction of yours before we get down to business, which is to talk Georgia.
Studied comprehensively my biography. Thanks for having me. I appreciate this podcast. I appreciate this platform. It does an amazing job keeping our voices heard, which we need crucially in a national attention. And you're making sure our voices are really reaching out to our international partners. Thanks.
Thank you, Nino. Let's get started with the current developments and the biggest story of the week. And I would say it is going to be the biggest story of the year, is that the BBC documentary, which is about Georgia. It's not a documentary. In fact, it is an investigative story, investigative report that alleges that the Georgian Dream government most likely used bromobenzyl cyanide, which is also known as Kamit, against demonstrators. In the first week of the 2024 demonstrators, when they erupted after Kobakhidze's this infamous statement. For those who don't know, bromobenzyl cyanide is a chemical agent that was first used in the First World War by French against the German. And later on in the 1930s, that was used by the US authorities to disperse crowds. It is extremely harmful. And if confirmed, obviously, that means that the Ivanishvili's regime was using chemical weapons against its own people. And not just demonstrators, obviously, because that stays for weeks and months. And I think that we all remember that peculiar smell on Rustaveli Avenue after the dispersal of demonstrators, when these water cannons were used. And what BBC basically claims is that the bromobenzyl cyanide was dissolved in this water. Okay, there is a very, I would say, panic-stricken response from the Georgian authorities to this story, what they did. It's been already 48 hours that the story was aired, and it was seen by millions already. Again, Georgian Dream, first reaction from the Georgian Dream government was that the BBC is a fake, so television, etc. It's a fake story. It is based on fake sources. Secondly, they started investigation, basically, and summoned some of the heroes of the story to the Special Security Service, okay, including Dr. Chahunashvili, whose research supported the story. Okay, so, I mean, my question to you as a lawyer, as a politician, and taking into account the scale of the scandal that is erupting, what will be the political and the legal consequences of it? Because, I mean, we are talking about substance that is illegal to own, to transport, to, I don't know, to store, and that can be qualified easily as chemical weapon.
Yes, obviously, it is a big scandal.
It is.
It is definitely, because it's, I'm assuming, pretty unprecedented. It also, the scale is, the scale of this being a scandal seems to be proven by their reactions that are pretty self-telling. They are not denying having used chemicals against their own people, in a sense that they are not counteracting or using counter-arguments or counter-substances they might have used. It was a front-page story that went viral.
Yes, absolutely.
And it is directly linked to the regime currently governing Georgia. Now, going into the ultimate consequences would be speculative, but obviously, if confirmed, this will have not just domestic political consequences, but also international legal consequences. And this is, in my opinion, what explains their reactions. This is what they fear, particularly given the context that Ivanishvili's regime now vehemently tries to settle with the West, to find links to somewhat legitimize its stance, which completely jeopardizes these efforts. Because if usage of chemical weapons is confirmed, then there is no chance whatsoever that they can ever go back to business as usual with any of the Western countries or civilized world. Particularly painful, I'm assuming, that this also completely cuts ties to attempted efforts to get along with Trump's administration and restart talks with the U.S. administration. So this is indeed, this definitely goes beyond domestic tragedy we have been facing for many years, but particularly for the last year. Particularly because it will certainly have not just international political consequences, but surely legal consequences the regime might face, the individuals might face. So they now need to act very decisively, pretty quickly. But as it seems, they don't really have much to confront the story, at least for the time being.
Okay, yeah, it is still a developing story, and the scale of the coverage is increasing, and a lot of, again, depends on how the Georgian dream government reacts, a lot of things will be coming up. So we'll be following this story, and on Sunday, Nodar Khashiladze and I will dig into the story and we'll bring more to you. Now let's get down to the business, which is talking Georgia and Georgian politics. It's been already years since this infamous statement from the Georgian Dream Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze when he publicly removed Georgia's Euro integration from agenda. And since then, again, the protests erupted, and we had 370th day of consecutive protests on Rustaveli Avenue and elsewhere. A year from that moment to now, in your opinion, who is winning, who is losing? If we kind of divide it like the Ivanishvili's regime and the democratic forces of Georgia, which is like opposition and the independent media and civil society organization, activists, etc. So again, who is winning, who is losing, and what is there next? What is coming? Because it is clear that the Georgian Dream was not able to reach the ultimate aim, which is to quell the protests and resistance and establish full-scale dictatorship. Maybe we are near there, but we're not still there. Or we're not yet there.
That's true. We are not there yet, but I believe we are on a steadfast way towards a consolidated autocracy, and let me explain why I believe that this is true for the moment. I hope things will change for the better, but at this point, I assume the power imbalance is immense, and the power imbalance is, given the current moment, in favor of the regime. 1 year has passed since Ivanishvili's appointee has exposed their true intentions, and I believe the very purpose of Ivanishvili being installed in the first place. I think even though Georgian Dream has long and successfully played a double game, misleading both domestic Georgian public and our international partners into believing that they were pro-Western or pro-European or independent actors. I strongly believe that they, from the very beginning, that it was a Russian project installed with the sole purpose to divert Georgia from the West, to ensure Georgia never really joins European Union, let alone NATO, and that it never challenges Russia's geopolitical interests in the region. What is happening now is basically consolidation of a, as you said, full-scale authoritarian rule. Ivanishvili has already managed to capture most of the formal and informal institutions, such as the government, the parliament, the courts, the municipalities, the Central Election Commission, most of the media.
There is no single institution that doesn't belong to him,
Exactly.
sadly.
What I mean by consolidating power and hijacking state institutions, the goal is to establish control over all institutions that are existential for democratic change. So the ultimate goal is to ensure they control all the mechanisms to stay in power indefinitely. And this is what they have successfully achieved through the first wave, as I call it, while they established control over electoral mechanisms as such. The next step is, in my opinion, what is happening now. They are now trying to substitute all democratic means with pseudo-democratic institutions, such as the loyal media, such as alternative political opposition, such as state-funded NGOs / gungos.
Yeah, maybe.
To have what the contemporary political scientists call an electoral autocracy, where you have formally elections, but through elections you can never really challenge the power or change the status quo. And the third wave, I'm assuming, which is also already taking place, is to change the electoral demography, meaning pushing out of the country critically thinking people who may not be easily manipulated, and keep in the country the pool of voters whom you can present a controlled menu of choices and who would agree on that and take part in this scam electoral process.
Sorry interrupting you here. So do you see this the electoral, not electoral, but education reform part of this process?
Yes, absolutely.
Which is like kind of uniforms in school, only one guidebook or whatever, and maybe Bidzina's picture on the wall.
Absolutely.
I don't know, yeah.
Absolutely, yes. Yes,
Soviet,
it is
yeah,
directly.
very Soviet
very
style,
Soviet,
isn't
very
it?
nothing
Yeah.
new.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing new. Just the means have adapted to new realities, but this is it's also not Ivanishvili specific know-how. It's not even Georgian, and it is happening everywhere. We've seen the playbook in Russia, in China, even Orban, Erdogan.
I
are
went
playing
to
by the
Soviet
same.
school, and I remember that
too.
Lenin picture in the class.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I missed that. Yeah, exactly. So definitely reforming academia and controlling academia is part of it, absolutely, because what they are doing now is going after the remaining few independent institutions, such as the few civil society organizations, ours among them, the independent media, protest movement, banning political parties or the opposition parties, and launching this reform of educational system, basically targeting independent universities, but also targeting schools to control future narrative, because that's what they are fighting for. To fully control the media, obviously, also to ensure they have control over the narrative and the distribution channels, so that they ensure safe outreach to the majority of the population. And this is what they have been pretty successful so far. The protest movement is getting inevitably weaker, not because the spirit of demonstrations has disappeared or gone anywhere, but because the power imbalance is so dramatic, and because the regime, which is now for 13 years in power, which is a long time, the regime has managed to also employ all the coercive means to suppress any democratic upheaval. The demonstrators lack the means to protect themselves, let alone or to defend themselves, let alone to weaken or shake the system proactively. And this is what gives them, given the current circumstances, the upper hand. Now, how can the power balance reshaped or power rebalanced? I hate to sound pessimistic, but even more, I dislike to feed illusions. There are limits to what people alone can do. What people internally and domestically can do is try to survive, keep their voices vocal, keep the protest alive, but there are limits to it. We need external pressure, and we need international geopolitical context to change. Because I believe this is a Russian-backed and installed government, because I believe they are strong in the first place because they have Russian backing. And if this positioning gets weakened, then I do believe it automatically affects Ivanishvili's regime as well. So what we are basically, and we're moving toward the bigger picture, what I hope for is a certain breakthrough on the international arena where Ukraine's and European positioning gets stronger vis-a-vis Russian current stance in this power struggle, and that then this opens a window of opportunity for the democratic forces in Georgia that need to stay alive, need to survive, and wait for a better moment.
Okay, we'll go to the international politics in a minute, but before that, okay, let's concentrate on Georgia's European perspective, which is kind of fading away. Well, it's already December, and in December there will be two major, I would say, events that would probably shape, not policy towards Georgia from the European Union, but decisions on Georgia. One is that European Commission's report on kind of how successfully Georgia fulfills the visa-free terms. And we also need to mention that the suspension mechanism is new suspension mechanism was adopted, which is makes it a lot easier now to suspend visa-free travel with the third countries and also suspend visa-free travel with particular groups. And the second thing is that the council meeting, the last council meeting of this year, which can basically decide that the Georgia is no longer on the enlargement agenda, which I think I had a week ago, I think, there was a very interesting interview from the German ambassador who it was the first interview that he came from the Berlin consultations back with the Radio Liberty, where he said that, well, the Germany is no longer working on Georgia's EU integration prospect and the agenda, and very likely that the Council will decide at the end of the year that Georgia to be removed from this agenda officially. So, of course, I mean, some might say that why is that important to Georgia? Now we have a bigger troubles, this consolidation of autocracy. We are surviving, as you mentioned yourself. But, I think that when we were talking who is winning, who is losing, one of the clear wins that the Georgia's democratic forces achieved so far or established so far was the non-recognition of the regime from the international players. And one of the key reasons why Georgian Dream is not recognized as a legitimate ruler is because not just because they rigged the elections, but because Georgia is a European country. It has a European perspective. It has candidate status, and it's measured differently compared to Azerbaijan or Belarus or any other classical authoritarian country. So again, if Georgia is removed from the European Union's enlargement agenda, if Georgia's candidate status is officially abolished or even frozen, that will make it easier from the players, international players, to start recognizing the regime here because, well, at the beginning, they will become de facto regime, then some technical relationships will resume, then some political contacts at mid-level, because, you can't forever have a country without legitimate government. And even de facto rulers who are illegitimate become legitimate if the democratic world recognizes that Georgia is an autocracy. So I'll stop my rant here and ask you, so what do you expect from the European Commission, the Council meeting, and what is going to be better for Georgia? Again, to call a spade and remove Georgia from the agenda because it is turning into a full-scale autocracy, or to keep it burning as long as it's possible to give a chance for the people of Georgia to come back. I don't know. So what's your take on this?
Well, it's certainly a challenging question and a challenging decision to be made by our European partners, because they also face a kind of dilemma when it comes to Georgia. Firstly, because they do see Ivanishvili is not somebody you can talk to the way you used to. Firstly, because, as you said, the circumstances have changed since 2024, and they also lack the formal grounds to cooperate with them in the formal way. Secondly, because I believe there is now a predominant assumption or understanding that he is not necessarily acting independently, but directly linked to somebody who is fighting a war against European interests. On the other hand, they also need Georgia. They do not want to alienate Georgian people. They do not want taking measures that would push Georgian people further into the hands of the oligarch, or even worse, Russia's, I don't know,
Sphere of
whatever
influence,
interest.
yeah.
Exactly. But when it comes to the European decision-making process, it is also a dilemma in a sense that they do need to take into consideration their domestic struggle, their domestic interests, their democratic cycles, which now strongly includes European security measures, or stronger European security measures, stronger control of the migration policies, but also looking that they are not importing any instability that might come from this region. Therefore, it's difficult to say what exact wording or outcome will those meetings have. What we do know for sure is that the report will not be any better from the previous ones when it comes to analyzing the structure or policies made by Ivanishvili. We do know for sure that Georgia is no longer part of the association trio. And we can strongly assume that the next enlargement wave to happen by 2030 will most likely not include Georgia at this time, which is a sad story. But as you said, sometimes calling things by its name, identifying the right diagnosis, may be a better start
for treatment.
For treatment, and for actually having a clear, coherent strategy towards the region, because this was not always the case. I mean, we need to be clear on that. Particularly Georgia, both Ukraine as well, but particularly Georgia and Eastern European countries have tried to convince the West for decades that the Caspian and Caucasus region do matter for the European security, that they are key for a lasting peace on the European continent. And no one would really take us seriously. And when it came to Russia, the better chosen policy was always to look away rather than to identify the facts, right? When we take, as example, 2008, I mean, in 2007, when Putin addressed the audience at the Munich Security Conference, his intentions were pretty clear.
Yeah, it was. He said that what he wanted.
Nothing should have been surprising to anyone what happened afterwards. And in 2008, when we were warning our European partners that Russia might launch a war against Georgia, they were saying, just make sure you don't get provoked. And once the war started, they then started looking for a scapegoat. and looking for somebody to blame. And this somebody was the small Georgia, not the aggressor. And then we said, if Putin comes away with invading Georgia, then Ukraine will be next. And no one really listened. And in 2014, again, the world was not prepared to respond. Even in 2022, they were unprepared to respond properly. However, the mindset has shifted. 2022 was a game changer, a threshold where, at least at the level of political elites, the understanding is there who the aggressor is, what Putin is after, what his genuine objectives are, and at least that they need to be prepared. Most importantly, European leaders now understand it's not only about Ukraine or Georgia or Moldova, but it's a war against European values. It's against European security. It's against for what Europe stands for, against what Europe stands for. Now, all of a sudden, German BND chef, the intelligence service, issues a report where they're saying they need to be ready by 2029 that Russia might attack Berlin. So the context has certainly changed. The regional dynamic has changed. In the Caucasus region, we are seeing developments.
Okay, let me take over from there. And now let's talk about regional and international dynamics. And you mentioned that, the Georgian people on their own don't have this full capacity to initiate change, and it needs right international context or framework. And again, internationally, things are shifting. And as you absolutely rightly mentioned, Europe is, mindset in Europe is being reshaped. And also, there is no longer such a thing as Euro-Atlantic unity. If you take a look what Trump is saying and doing, I think that everybody realizes in Europe that, the time has come when Europe has to take care of their own security. And now, when the war has been going on in Ukraine already almost a fourth year, you can't really do it without Ukraine. So Ukraine, whether you want it or not, is becoming an essential part of European security, particularly when you want to resist Russia's invasion. So my question to you is that, again, in this ever-changing international dynamic, when, again, everybody is awaiting a peace deal and this peace deal is not coming, do you expect a peace deal anytime soon? And what kind of peace deal or development you expect? And what kind of international dynamic you believe is beneficial or suitable for Georgia's democratic forces to capitalize on that? Because, again, things changed You said that Ivanishvili, since it was installed as the leader of Georgia in 2012, his chief aim was to bring Georgia into Russian sphere of influence. And maybe for some time it was noticeable from the very beginning, but the overwhelming majority of people, experts, etc., they thought only when the war started in Ukraine, it became quickly clear for everyone that, again, Ivanishvili was on the Russian side. Well, that happened because
he made
international, because international dynamic has changed.
Yes.
Okay, and this is why it became so obvious so quickly. If the international dynamic changes the other way around, I think that things will change so rapidly in Georgia as well. So, what is that international dynamic that is beneficial, possibly, for Georgia's to put Georgia back to democratic path?
Needless to say that Georgia and Ukraine are fighting the same battle. It started decades ago. It has not started in 2008. It even started in the 90s with the occupation of one breakaway region in Georgia, then with the invasion in 2008, then occupation of Crimea, and then 2022. This is part of the same battle, along with the ongoing hybrid war that Russia is leading in these countries for many, many years. And Georgia has been a testing ground for many years for invasions, for its hybrid attacks, for its cyber attacks, etc., that then have become effective mechanisms to fight against European values elsewhere. Obviously, this dynamic shows that Georgia also very much depends on, or the success of Georgia as a sovereign state depends on how the war ends in Ukraine and on whose terms. And by that I mean there will be at some point no other way other than put the negotiating, put the parties close to the negotiation table. But it depends on what leverage the parties will have by then. As it is now, given the current power stance, it's obvious it's not necessarily in Putin's interest to actually cease the fire and start negotiations, because he still feels empowered or powerful enough to make Europe believe they can conquer Europe.
Yeah. And
Ukraine,
then
and then
yeah.
Europe. And as long as this perception or mindset prevails, there is no possibility of having a peace deal in the way we all want it to be, as a precondition for a lasting peace. The hopeful side of it is that Europe understands that. I'm leaving the United States out of this part deliberately because the messages have been mixed and confusing, and because it's about European security in the first place, and Europe needs to take lead, and this is a good thing.
Absolutely.
Even though we all wished U.S. would be more
And
effectively
even
involved,
if things change
but
in the
still,
future, that's still
it
the
needs-
right thing
exactly,
to do. Yeah.
Exactly. And I do believe Europe has the capacity and strength to consolidate and actually signal strength, because this is what matters for Putin. This is what matters for Moscow. Now, going back to the region and Georgia's dilemma, it's also interconnected because, as you said, because the regional dynamic has shifted, because Azerbaijan has completely freed itself from Russian influence, because Armenia, seeing Russia's unreliability, now restarts talks with the European Union, even is ready to talk peace with Azerbaijan. It makes it more important for Moscow to maintain its power over Tbilisi, because obviously geographically maintaining control over Georgia is key. Both ways. If he loses Georgia, then the Caucasus region is gone altogether. If he can keep control over Tbilisi, then he maintains leverage, at least to destabilize the region and impede the talks or intentions, whatever intentions Azerbaijan and Armenia might want to pursue. So this is a geopolitical strategy, but it's a clear strategy. It's a clear objective of Putin. It's not a hidden agenda. Yep. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows in the meantime what needs to be done. And in my understanding, what actually needs to be done is to weaken Russia's international stance as a precondition to start negotiations, because this power balance needs to change in favor of the European Union, obviously of Ukraine, in order to be able to talk with Putin, in order to be able to push him into the negotiations, which he has no interest at the moment. Also, on a hopeful side, is the strength of Ukraine in the way they negotiate and the way they keep, or they are trying to keep their positions against the bigger players, because it could have been differently. And therefore, it's a very dangerous part of potential peace deal if it includes any kind of regime change in Ukraine before this power balance takes place on the Russian side. This is key. This is something I see as a big risk, because in all kinds of peace drafts, somewhere prevails this notion that Ukraine needs to hold new elections. In Ukraine, they need to think about the democratic regime change, which, in my opinion, is a very, very dangerous move.
Yeah, it's very interesting to continue talking to you, but the time is against us. So is there anything that you would like to add to the podcast before we say goodbye to our viewers?
I hope to be back soon. I hope you can keep this platform. I do assume there will be pressure. The pressure will increase. We all need now to survive. As I said, we are in a survival mode. And we need to stay, by we, I mean the democratic players, because the better times will come. They will come. Autocratic regimes can sustain for some time, but not indefinitely. And by then, we need to be ready to get Georgia on the democratic track again.
Thank you, Nino, for this truly insightful conversation. Thank you for watching us. Thanks for listening to us. Please like us, subscribe to us. Don't forget Spotify if you prefer listening. And I'll see you next week.